Yeah, so I just want to acknowledge that energy that I think is in all our hearts. These have been some rough roads lately. A lot of challenge, a lot of people in darkness, a lot of death. And when I was taking that in, just last night, I was reminded of something called the healing crisis. I'm sure you're all very aware of that. It's when symptoms briefly worsen before beginning to improve. And I was thinking about how my son, who I'm having a real rough road with lately, would get a lot of fevers when he was little. And I always trusted that it was exactly what he was needing. And he would break through them quickly, and there would be some kind of development that would have happened, some kind of expansion. And it was palpable. You could see it in the way he acted as a little kid. And then I realized we have to let go of our attachment and expectation of what brief is. Because sometimes we want these things to shift more quickly. And we're being asked to be very patient. Just something, I don't know about you, but I've had a little bit of a struggle with. So a crisis is a turning point. It's that turning point that can cause greater expansion or diminishment. And if we're going to make this needed turn, whatever it is that's up in our lives or on the planet, what Joanna Macy called the great turning point, it will be because we have reconnected. That's why she called her work the work that reconnects. There's something that's separating, or we're experiencing some piece of separation, and it's in the reconnection where the turning point will shift toward the best case scenario. So there's something special about today. Anyone?
Full moon? Okay.
Yes, and it actually happens in just an hour from now. So, like right at the end of this. So, I was like, I did know. I didn't know the exact timing. I looked that up last night. I was like, oh, makes perfect sense. Always does. And this is a Leo full moon, another piece of synchronicity, because we know that that's about being lion-hearted. It's about courage. And so when I took that in, I realized that my life has really been a quest for how to understand how to nurture that courage that's necessary to make the evolutionary moves that we're being asked to make in this life and why we're here. And I always remember the lion in the Wizard of Oz who wanted courage so desperately. And he had it all along. And we all have it. It's an innate expression of humanity. But it also takes practice. We're being asked to be generative, to generate something new, something without a blueprint. And it's something we've been training for our whole lives, if we really look at who we've become at this moment. And that takes courage to trust that and to express it. And courage is an expression of love. And that's the big guide in this. The big guide is love. The best quote I know, and I've used it before, about harnessing the power of love to guide creativity is Teilhard de Chardin.
What?
Teilhard de Chardin,
Oh.
who says, someday, after mastering the winds, the waves, the tides, and gravity, we shall harness for God the energies of love. And then, for a second time in the history of the world, humanity will have discovered fire. And I've used that quote so many times. And for some reason, this time I noticed, why fire? Why is it fire that we will have discovered for the second time? In the alchemical tradition, the fire element is considered the most important because it's the primary element of transformation, or more accurately, transmutation, which moves something along its evolutionary path. So what Teilhard is talking about is this second time in the history of the world, this will be about this deep transmutation, allowing the unconditional love of the universe, letting in that we are loved, that we're never just abandoned here with this massive challenge. Like say, okay, figure it out. No, we have this gift of the love of the universe for us, our innate love that is expressed through courage. It's this powerful evolutionary act we can perform, this practice and source of courage. As we all know, another way to practice courage is to be aware of and let go of our negative self-talk. Yeah. I'm just going to lose it here for a minute.
Holy cow.
You know, it's like we can practice that our whole lives and it's still there to let go of, to keep letting go of it. It takes a lot, you know, to keep seeing that we still have this in us. Even though we might know that it's the ego trying to keep us safe, trying to keep us playing small so we stay in our comfort zone. That's our reptilian brain trying to just keep us in survival. And just noticing the stranglehold it has on us. It's a lot. You know, and you think of what created that turning point for the cowardly lion, who had told himself his whole life that he was cowardly. Nothing he could do about it. It's just cowardly. I'm the cowardly lion. You know? That's who I am. Drilling that in day after day. And I feel like we do that. And when Dorothy offered him love, really saw him in his wholeness, in his truth, in his innate humanity, which was courageous. That's what gave him the ability to love himself. So just no matter how many times we look at this, sometimes it just goes in a little bit deeper. And we love each other a little bit more, and we see each other a little bit more, and we see ourselves differently. Let's talk about regeneration. That was kind of the preface. The space I know I needed to be in to even make sense of regeneration. Because this has become just the central theme of my work, and it's grounded in reclaiming our relationship to the land, reclaiming it as a sacred relationship. And why is this essential? Why is it essential that we reclaim the sacred relationship to the land? Because we're realizing that it's essential to our wholeness as human beings. And it's only from that wholeness that we can make this evolutionary leap. We can't do it without a sacred relationship to the land. And that's what's been stripped away and marketed away from us and taken out of our lifestyles as we've infused all this comfort into our lives for so many years now. And we've forgotten that we are not whole without an engaged, sacred relationship with the land. And I've talked about the mandorla symbol before. I was going to bring my necklace that I have, but basically it's this symbol of the two interlocking circles with this space in between that's like an almond. And if you look at those old pictures that are painted of the Virgin Mary, they're always in this, they're almond shape with the light streaming out, because they represent the place where human and spirit intersect. The most powerful relationship we can immerse ourselves in or remember that we have is that interlocking place where there's no separation. It's perhaps the most sacred symbol known to humankind. It's said to be inscribed on the Ark of the Covenant, which happened 3,000 years ago, 1,000 years before Christ. Remember Raiders of the Lost Ark? That was the Ark of the Covenant. It's also on the Chalice Well in Glastonbury, England, a well that has been in constant use for the last 2,000 years. Wells are that gateway to the spirit world through the portal of water coming through deep in the earth. Another symbol of our connectedness with the earth. It's no wonder these symbols that are about our connection to the earth are the most ancient, the most, what has always been a source of comfort to us as human beings, who I think in times of struggle feel very abandoned here in this challenging place that we've come to evolve within. And it's through remembering that and experiencing that connection with the earth that we source courage and comfort. And it's that most profound experience that we seek. It's at the heart of all the wisdom traditions, oneness. I want to read to you the best, it's just the most powerful description of regeneration. And it's from Paul Hawken, who's done so much scientific work around how we do regeneration. But Paul is a deeply spiritual man. And you just see it guiding all his work and why I think it's so powerful. He says, our planet and youth are telling us the same story. Vital connections have been severed between human beings and nature, within nature itself, and between people, religions, governments, and commerce. This disconnection is the origin of the climate crisis. It is the very root, and it is where we discover solutions and actions that can engage all people, regardless of income, race, gender, or belief. We live on a dying planet, a phrase that may have sounded inflated or over the top not long ago. The Earth's biological decline, and he's very specific about saying biological decline, is how it adapts to what we are doing. Nature never makes a mistake. We do. The Earth will come back to life no matter what. Nations, people, and cultures may not. If putting the future of life at the heart of everything we do is not central to our purpose and destiny, why are we here? That's That's the big question. At some point in our lives, we were always asking, why are we here? Why am I here? What's my soul purpose? And I think we're starting to realize that it's an evolution of consciousness that wherein lies the potential for everything next. So we're here to evolve. We've somehow separated ourselves so that we can know ourselves. Like there's the beauty in like the journey back to oneness from being thrown out into separation. So how do we act? That is a reflection of loving ourselves. That is a prayer. And that we then bring into our love of the world. What does this look like in practice? And that's always my fascination. And again, Paul's work on this is just the best, so I'm not going to try and paraphrase it. He says, the needs of people and living systems are often presented as conflicting priorities. Biodiversity versus poverty, or forests versus hunger, when in fact, the destinies of human society and the natural world are inseparably intertwined, if not identical. Social justice is not a sideshow to the emergency. Injustice is the cause. Giving every young child an education, providing renewable energy to all, erasing food waste and hunger, ensuring gender equity, economic justice and shared opportunity, recognizing our responsibility and making amends to myriad communities of the world for past injustices. These and more are at the very heart of what can turn the tide for all of humanity, that turning point. Rich and poor and everyone in between. Reversing the climate crisis is an outcome. Regenerating human health, security, and well-being, the living world, and justice is the purpose. So sometimes we see these things as these sort of separate things. Should I work on social justice? Should I work on hunger? Should I work on something environmental? Should I work on animal rights? They're all the purpose. Paul says the number one cause of human change is when people around us change. And we can change our approach and our knitting together, our reconnection through anything that calls to us. That's why we each have such different soul purposes. And there's not one way that's the way or holds the answer. It's like just for us to reconnect with our soul purpose, with the assist and through the sacred relationship that we have with Gaia. Because there's endless love for us from that mother. Creating a world that works for everyone and all of life is the ultimate act of love. It's something Werner Erhard in the Est work, some of you maybe remember that. He would always say, we're here to create a world that works for everyone. And we don't because we don't think we're powerful enough to do that. That's the only reason. We think it's just too big. I don't even know where to start. Why bother? Or somebody else must be doing it. But it's so what we're realizing in this quantum experience is that we all make an absolutely essential difference to the whole. A book I really recommend. It's a big, dense read, but it's absolutely so readable. It's called The New Republic of the Heart. written by Terry Patton, who's an integralist. And he writes about something called the win-win-win. We're all familiar with a win-win, when all human interests in some kind of a negotiation, are met, and it's a win for everybody. We love that. It's a win-win. We always look for that. He talks about a win-win-win, adding in that in every decision we make, looking for the win of the earth as well. An example might be like a couple of siblings inherit a piece of land and have to decide what to do with it. A typical win-win might be, well, we sell it and split the profits. Then we're taking care of each other. But what if you consider what is best for the land? That makes it a whole different kind of process. Especially if the siblings know that if they are selling it to the developer who they're thinking to sell it to will degrade it. If the health and functioning of the ecosystem on that land is part of the consideration of what to do with it, how would that affect the decision? It's a whole different process when it's not just about me and you and our human interests, but how do we bring the earth into it, into all our decisions? That's what starts to reconnect that sacred relationship. Doing that work takes that courageous piece of realizing that our interests are not maximized unless the interests of the land are maximized in the decision. Because it requires that we get up close to the ways that we have been acting in separation. The waste, the neglect, the overconsumption. And it's not about being in the shame of that as human beings. It's just being in the courage of noticing it and noticing that we actually can make different choices. We're the ones who can do that. We're the wealthiest 16% of the world that uses 80% of its resources. And Terry Patton, who wrote The New Republic of the Heart, would always talk about that. How much courage it takes to let that in, to look at our own lifestyles and make different choices. Some of you may know David Corton, who's often on alternative radio. He used to be the editor of that magazine, Yes, which was so amazing. And he talks about economics, economics that bring in actually this sacred relationship to the land, right?
Yeah.
These reframes, we've got to start doing this, like reframing these ways that we've been enculturated to act. So a big thing he talks about is things like replacing gross domestic product as the primary measure of economic performance with measures of health and well-being of people and nature. We've got to start measuring that. And it can, again, seem like, oh my God, how could I even try to start to do that in this big global system that is just churning and churning? But we can do it in the choices and in the purview that we have in our own lives, and to trust and know how important that is when we change, that does have an impact, because we know we're all part of the unified field and it can't not have an impact. He talks about these local things we can do, like giving special reward to those who do essential work that is especially tiring, unpleasant, and dangerous. And Rita and I are starting this effort for the Center for Human Flourishing that would be that way to connect these people in our communities that do this essential work that is especially tiring, unpleasant, and dangerous, and getting complementary wellness practices available to them more easily. It's about restoring and regenerating the living earth. And we can do this. We can start gardens. We can find, even if we don't have the energy to start a food garden in our yard, we could plant a perennial that is a native plant that would provide just a bit more habitat for a native pollinator. We all can do that. We can plant that somewhere as an act of regeneration. Corton talks about organizing bioregionally, oddly enough. He talks about minimizing air travel by vacationing within local bioregions. And we can look at, do I need to take that vacation that I think is a measure of my success as a human being? Or can I choose to do something that has less of a carbon footprint and would connect me more to my bioregion in some meaningful way? So these are the choices that allow us to live more courageously as a stand for reconnecting to the sacred relationship that we know we need. The last part of this that is so important is self-love. And it's something has been that undercurrent of all of my whole life and this work, and I see it coming up again and again. Thought leaders mentioning it, more attention on how we nurture our hearts, because it's so necessary that we be heart-led during this time. Loving ourself. We can get a little derailed with this because self-love can get sometimes caught up in what we don't want, which is narcissism. But sacred self-love is a healthy honoring of our strengths and unique gifts. It's a reflection of the way Gaia and God, the universe, loves us. We all know that inherently. That child of God piece that evokes that unconditional love of the universe for us. We know that in us, that we are loved. But we can get afraid that self-love is that selfish expression or narcissistic, but narcissism is an expression of low self-esteem where there's the constant need for reassurance and adoration. It's externally sourced. But healthy self-love is that way that we are loved by the Sacred Mother. And thinking about it that way puts us, I think, more into that more honoring relationship with ourselves. It's not about being only loving ourselves if we're perfect and do all the right things and say all the right things and have all the right things. No, our Sacred Mother wants us to know that we are loved and wants us to be confident in our unique gifts. And some of us didn't get mothered the way we ultimately know is how you develop a healthy human being. A lot of us didn't get that. But we can get it in that relationship with the earth and with a stronger sense of surrendering to more self-love. Knowing that we were incarnated here with this sole purpose. And through honoring that, we can start to let in the love that is there for us everywhere, even though it may not have come from our biological mothers. I wanted to end by doing a practice that I've never been a drummer, but I've been in countless shamanic journeys where I've been drummed to. And I will tell you, there is nothing more heart-opening than the drum. And we're not even taught this either. It's like drumming is one of the most healing things that Indigenous people used as a practice to reconnect us to our soul purpose. Like when When kids in indigenous cultures would go awry, they would be drummed to start to heal them, to reconnect them to their soul purpose. It opens our hearts. We typically, in shamanic ceremonies, drum in the south of the elements because the south is about heart opening and healing and recognition of the fullness that nature is for us. Nature is abundant for us. And that's part of regeneration, is letting in how much love there is for us from the world. And it's through that loving relationship and the love that we have for ourselves and the love that we heal around our hearts that we'll be able to be that courageous healer and fulfill on our destiny in this moment. So I just want to invite Rita to drum with me. Rita, I would love for you to say what's special about the drum that you have. Because this is another piece of synchronicity that just happened last night that I was like, oh my God.
This drum is Jennifer Cotto's. It came from Standing Rock. She was in Standing Rock.
So it's a place that, as we remember what happened at Standing Rock, probably one of the most beautifully courageous movements that has happened in our lifetimes, I would say, because it was an evolutionary stand that everyone who went there took to be nonviolent, to have everything that they did there come from prayer and acknowledgement of that sacred piece of land, and to not be forced into violence, even though extreme violence happened. So I was thinking we would do just sort of a heartbeat drum for a while.